Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast, where our goal is to help you increase your reputation as a leader, increase your ability to influence others, and increase your ability to fully engage your team to deliver remarkable results. Hi, I'm Perry Holley, a Maxwell Leadership facilitator and coach.
And I'm Chris Goede, Executive Vice President with Maxwell Leadership. Welcome and thank you for joining. Today, we're going to talk about unwritten rules as a leader, not only just as a leader, but as an inclusive leader. And so really interested, we have a client that we're diving into and we're helping with some of these topics that we're going to talk about today. So you're going to want to tune in. Everything we're going to talk about today, I think, is going to be very applicable to every single one of us so that we become more inclusive, because we all have unwritten rules.
We do. You just gave away my secret of develop once, use many.
There you go. So, I love it. Yep. So before we get started, I want to encourage you to go to maxwellleadership.com/executive podcast. And there you can learn more about our 360-degree leader course that we do a lot of coaching, a lot of training around both in-person and virtual. If you're interested in that, please leave your information on that form and our team will be in touch with you. So as we're talking about this is really something, the unwritten rules and the inclusive leader is something that's overlooked a lot. And we're going to dive into it today because it is something that is every leader has, every person has these unwritten rules and what that looks like. And whether you intended them or not, they're around your actions, they're around your preferences. All of that creates the culture that you guys have inside the team. And so everything about that, your unwritten rules in this inclusive leadership role speaks volumes, even more than anything inside your organization, including the employee handbook. So let's dive in and let's talk about this. Like, what is the unwritten rules, where we're going to go first?
Yeah, well, the employee handbook, well, those are the written rules.
Those are the written rules.
And we all know what the expense guidelines are and the HR guideline. We've got those. Those are written rules. But these unwritten rules, and every leader has them, every parent has them, every friend has them, is that they're implied expectations of what it's like to be with you and what you expect of others. They can help you be a more inclusive leader, or they can really, this is why I got onto this, was I never met a leader once that said, I'm going to exclude somebody on my team today.
Right.
No,
but it happens.
Everybody wants to be an inclusive leader. How is this exclusion happening?
It's good.
And I think sometimes it's by some of our implied expectations, things we haven't really come to grips with on that.
Well, let me give you an example. This could be in some of your one-on-one responses to the team. It also could be part of your team dynamics in some of your team meetings, to where maybe you have a leader that when there is something that has to happen, high profile, it's a big project, a big job, you're in a meeting, and they immediately turn to the same 2 or 3 team members to get feedback, to ask their thoughts, to ask them to run with it. There becomes an unwritten rule with the rest of the team that's like, oh, Chris, when a certain situation gets to this level, goes to that part of the team, right? It just begins to happen from your actions. It's not intentional, because we don't ever get to that point where we're trying to exclude people, but it's going to happen because the leader has unwritten rules.
And maybe I should give you a couple of examples, because we have an exercise about this in one of our offerings, the 360-degree leader, about how you lead up, down, and across. And so part of about leading up is understanding what are your leader's rules. So do I understand what are your unwritten rules? And does our team understand what your unwritten rules are? Some unwritten rules might be, don't be late. You'll see some organization where people can wander in 2 or 3 minutes, 5 minutes late. It's not looked down on, I guess. But in certain other leaders, don't be late. That could be an unwritten rule. I asked this in a class once. I think they were being serious, because there was a kind of a uncomfortable laugh through the room. But one person said, don't leave the office before the boss leaves. I said, what? He goes, we sit by the window and look into the parking lot. When the boss's car is gone, we can leave. I go, okay, that's terrible.
Yeah.
But it was some unwritten rule that if the boss is here, I need to be here to do that. I'll include this in the learner guide. There's some ideas here, but follow through on your commitments. Your leader expects you to follow through on commitments. That's an unwritten rule. Perform at your full potential are you putting your whole self? That's an unwritten rule. Take responsibility could be an unwritten rule. Be open and honest could be an unwritten rule. So there's a 20.
I'll jump in here real quickly. There's about 20 of them. And actually, it's a really great exercise to do with your team. And it still shows up. I did this exercise with one of my team members probably 10 years ago. And to this day, he will come to me and he say, I know you always say, bring things to me quickly, right? And so he's like, it's one of my unwritten rules. And he says that as he's then explaining to me what he wanted to bring to my attention. And for me, one of them is bring important things to my attention quickly. Why? Yeah. For me, it's because I can get ahead of solving the problem as fast as possible. John says it's not the first one to identify a situation, the first one to start trying to fix it. And so I want to know quickly. And so to this day, 10 years later, he still prefaces every conversation he's getting to come to you. Tell me, bring problems to you quickly. Here it is.
Right.
And it doesn't matter, weekends, nights, or whatever. I want to know what it is, and he brings it to my attention.
It's a great exercise.
So
In the room, I'll have. I love it if I have the leader and the team in the room. But I'll have the team get together, and you pick out what do you think the top 5 unwritten rules from our list of 30 here, and then I have the leader privately. What are your of these 30, what are your top 5 unwritten rules? And then we play a little matching game to see how well do you know your leader. And the leaders sometimes are surprised that you think that about me.
That's right.
You didn't get that.
I've been in that conversation. Good conversation.
And maybe we shouldn't go too much further before make sure that when we say inclusive leader, and you hear this term if you hear diversity, equity, inclusion is the I think is a real leadership competency that says people on my team feel like, and this is a really big word, that they belong. I feel a sense of belonging on this team. They belong. They're valued. It's safe. I'm an insider, not an outsider here. So I can be me. I don't have to fit in. I belong. And so this idea of being an inclusive leader is huge because it unleashes people to be who they are and to bring their full self to work. You mentioned discretionary effort. I bring all of me because I feel like I'm an insider on this team, not an outsider.
Yeah. So as we dive in, the next one I want to look at here is about inclusive leadership in action. And we like to define culture as how do we think, act, and interact in its simplest terms. And that's what we want. We want an inclusive culture of people feeling able to act in a certain way, to be able to think in a certain way, to be able to interact with each other. And so as a leader, we need to understand what that looks like. And we need to unpack what it looks like. So you need to understand that your team is reading your body language all the time. 55% of what we communicate comes right from our body language, more than any other part of it, right? And so they are watching you as a leader, and they're determining by watching you whether they feel like they're an insider or an outsider. Back to my example a few minutes ago about a meeting, right? There are some in that meeting example that they feel like an outsider because anything that was high priority is going to one of the insiders. And so what does that look like as a leader? Am I portraying that? And they're trying to then, the team that's on the insider, they're like, hey, am I valued on this team? Is it okay for me to be myself? Should I speak up and say, well, what do y'all think about that? They're probably not going to do that. Back to your word about belong. They probably don't feel like they belong in that meeting or belong in the team because when, in essence, the game's on the line, they're going to a different part of the team. And so I think if we want as leaders for inclusion inside our team to rise, then we've got to model that and how we're acting and living that out.
And you're bringing up a really interesting, the example you were using is one that I see a lot. I'm getting ready to teach this lesson for a client, and I actually have an exercise in there about the inclusive team meeting. Because almost all of the exclusionary feelings or inclusionary feelings are in our communication, and usually our biggest form of communication is in meetings that we have. So how are you hosting these meetings? And, I'll give you a real practical thing is to start with, if you're thinking that, I need to pay more attention to my language and how I'm communicating, is that start by really noticing and naming your unwritten rules. Can you just call them out? And so a question that I've used here was, what assumptions are being made here with the people around the table? Like you gave some really good ones there. Are they assuming that he's always going to look to Perry because he and Perry do the podcast together and Perry always has the creative idea? That's an exclusionary thought, is that no, my unwritten rule is I expect everyone to come prepared with a point of view. That'd be a good unwritten rule. Everybody knows that even though Perry is obviously head and shoulders above everyone else and is the most creative person in the room and best looking.
100%. He even though he doesn't show up for the team meetings all the time.
Humble. That Chris expects everyone to bring an idea. Another question, who benefits from the process and who might be left out? So if you're proposing an idea, and we do this all the time, we really need to have some activities in a workshop that really engage the classroom. Who do we look to?
Susan Davis. Yeah.
Yeah. And well, then do the rest of us feel like,
right,
what, I've got nothing to add.
Right,
I got no creativity. I have no innovative thoughts.
Right.
Why are you excluding me? So you think, what would be my unwritten rule that I want to start? Maybe like you said, you bring it back to the leader. You said, bring it to you early.
Right.
So, and so if I were in the room, I'd say, you said, bring your creative ideas. And I look at Susan trying to keep, make sure she doesn't speak before me.
Right.
Do I feel like I'm supposed to do that, or do I just shut up and I'm excluded? Oh, we're talking about innovation and creativity. I should just sit down and be quiet.
Yes.
That's exclusionary. And so how do I make people feel like they belong?
Yeah. And we're going to get to the next point of valuing all contributions from the team. Going back to this, here's one that I think is just interesting that probably a lot of people resonate with, which is email communication outside of office hours. One of the things that's
a great one.
Right. They could be written. It could be written in your communication plan, what the expectations are.
Often not. No.
But often it's not. And as leaders, you got to be careful, and you better communicate to your team that an unwritten rule is you don't need to respond. I may be working, I may be thinking, and not using my time delayed email or whatever. You don't need to respond. But then you have some people that think it's a rule. Chris sent an email, I need to respond.
Yeah.
And then the other people, if they don't know the unwritten rule is you don't need to, they feel pressure, and then they do. It's just a simple little rule. But everything you're talking about, from meetings to client facing, all that is so important to your team to have great clarity around that. So when you get into this example that Perry was just talking about in regards to some of our engagement activities, and we go to Susan, right? But no, we want everybody to speak into it. So how are we valuing all those contributions and doing it in a way that we make sure everybody has time to speak? Now, some people are not gifted in that way, and they're just going to be like, that's not me. I'm good. I'm not going to be able to do that. But there are people that will dominate those conversations. And so as a leader, you need to make sure, are you hearing from too many of ideas from one voice? Or is one part of the room not speaking up, but they have really good ideas? So how do you walk through that? How do you make sure that you go about doing that and making sure that everybody is contributing? You gotta make sure at times that you are willing to say, hey, Perry, hold that thought for just a minute. I want Donna, who, by the way, is one of the quieter of our teams, to give me her thoughts and her ideas. She may say, I don't have any. Okay, that's great. But I know there's a couple more around the table that do.
That's such a good example.
And so how do I then say, now, Perry, tell me what you were thinking? Because isn't it also often true that those that then speak first usually have the most dominant, passionate idea that may sway the room? And while I know you're going to bring something to the table that's pure gold, I want other people to add to it that's going to make your gold even just a little bit better. And the other thing, too, about this, when you think about the different dynamics of a room, you should have a diversity of personality and thought in the room. But what happens is when there are people that are alike, they may have tension and be like, I want my idea over Perry's, right? And then may have some tension on your idea. I think mine's better. But there's really, there's no disconnect. But when you are opposite personality, maybe you're not comfortable speaking up in a meeting, maybe you're a little bit more reserved. Maybe what ends up happening is, if you don't get curious and try to pull out of one of them and go where they're at, they're going to disconnect, and you're going to disconnect from them. So when you're alike, there'll be a little bit of tension at times. When you're dislike people, then you're just going to disconnect. As leaders, you need to be aware of that, because that happens. And I promise you do it unintentionally, don't even know it, with people on your team. And that is not creating an inclusive culture.
And such a great example, too, what you're saying about, and just in thinking about our team meetings, there's some people that are loud. I'm sorry. There's some people that are quiet. There are some people that, I noticed the example you gave, you'll actually go around the room and said, Donna, she'll be quiet. But I've noticed that when you call on her,
she has something to say.
She has something to say, and it's good.
Yes.
It's a deeper thought than many of us have had, and it's actually more meaningful. But would she have sat there feeling excluded? I can't get a word in edgewise because Perry and Chris are loud and I'm not. Will they hold that back? So I think, to summarize this, what you were sharing about, what you really need to be doing is, can you develop this spidey sense around paying attention to the conversations, paying attention to if somebody overbearing, if somebody taking too much, can you speak up in real time was one of my mottos for myself is I need to speak up. Hey, and you gave a great example. Hey, let's table just for a minute. I want to hear what Donna has to say.
Yeah.
Or, hey, just for a second, I think everybody's kind of piling on to one idea. Does anybody have as group think is happening? A lot of people, it's very safe. I know that he really likes Jason, and Jason gave an idea, so I'm going to say what Jason said. And group things start. No, I need everybody bringing a point of view, and that's one of my unwritten rules. Everybody has a point of view. Everybody gets to speak. Everybody's expected to speak. That's my unwritten rules, and that makes everyone feel included. What we're really trying to get away from is that. Obviously, Chris and Perry have a strong relationship because they do a lot of stuff in podcasts and they travel and they do stuff. So Perry's an insider. I'm an outsider.
Right.
Oh, that's terrible. That
Right,
really,
right.
you can't afford that. So when you and I are together, we actually go intentionally to different sides of the room.
Right.
We try to be in places so that we're not being insider. We want everybody to be like an insider because some people are going to feel like
They're gonna
I'm
feel
not in the inner circle with Chris or with Perry. And I said, no, I have a big circle and I wanted you all to feel included.
And if you don't, as a leader, if you don't address that verbally and communicate it and try to pull it out, what ends up happening is that when there is assumption or silence, those team members that maybe feel like, and every situation is a little bit different, that they're on the outside, they fill their mind and their thought with negative, and you're not going to get full engagement. And they're not going to feel like they have purpose and all of those things that come along with that. I wonder how much of that right there that we're talking about, this whole topic is really driving the overall engagement level of teams, which is horrendous around the world to such a low number.
And it kind of just continuing our conversation, are we developing, can you develop this culture of belonging?
Yeah.
And the belonging is such a huge word here, but what are your thoughts around, is everything we're just this intentionality of a leader listening to how they're speaking, what might be an unwritten rule, how things are flowing in meetings, how communication happens? Is this a culture of belonging? Can we build that?
Yeah, I think you can. What I want you to hear me say is that I'm not saying everyone gets a trophy. Okay, that's not what I'm saying. But you can understand at the core of who your team is and how they're made up, where their strengths are, and you can pull that out and you can make sure where some may fit in better and others don't. And you can facilitate that. That's probably a really good word of how do you facilitate that in your team so that they feel like they belong in a way.
Yeah, and I love that. And it's a little bit of, I always say this, I'm facilitating, but there may be a little improv going on here because I'm going to have to go off script a bit.
Yeah.
I think about a term that's used about why are we doing this is that you went to a lot of trouble to hire a diverse group of people. We're not all the same. We have differences. And diversity covers a number of different headings there. But the beauty of that is we bring diverse thought, but diverse ideas. We don't is not all thinking the same. We have different experiences. But if you are not inclusive, if people don't feel that they belong, they feel that they're an outsider, they will, and the term in the business is called, they will cover. I'm covering who I am. Again, I'm going back. I just have to fit in to be what you want me to be. And then I'm not going to contribute. I'm going to armor up, not open up. And I'm going to just give you what you want.
Yeah.
I'm not going to bring my whole diverse self to the team. And this is a terrible place. You just killed all your diversity efforts by making people assimilate to be like you.
Yeah.
And so I love this idea and this whole topic around, can you be considering what it is we are communicating through unwritten rules, our implied expectations for people about how we communicate so that we let people be their true full self.
I think leaders that do this also foster collaboration over hierarchy.
Oh, huge.
This, again, I'm gonna go back. I mean, John Maxwell has modeled this for me for a long time. And we've been in meetings and it's like, the best idea wins, guys. Not my idea.
Right.
I'm gonna bring an idea. But by the way, if we don't make my idea better, then the rest of you are not coming back to the meeting again. And so this is so important because listen, your title, whatever your title is, walks in the door, walks in a meeting before you do. So there's already this perception of when I walk in that I need to whatever.
It's an unwritten rule. I need to snap to.
They feel like it, right? It's an unwritten rule. And you got to make sure that in a culture where of an inclusive leader is that, hey, no. It doesn't matter where the idea is. It doesn't matter what your title is. It doesn't matter who's in this meeting. I just want the best people that are in this meeting that are going to help make this opportunity the best that it possibly could be. So here's some practical things that we have for you. There's 4 items as we look at this, and we'll try to put the cookies on the bottom shelf for you, okay? Number 1, I want you to ask your team what unwritten rules they've noticed. And be ready to listen. Back to the example that Perry was talking about earlier that we actually do when we're with teams in some of our consulting days and we're having fun with the leader and the team in there. Ask your team, what do you perceive are my unwritten rules? The next one is, I want you to audit your decisions, okay? So who's getting opportunities? This for me, maybe who's being overlooked. I see this a lot on sales teams. You go, oh, that's a big opportunity right here. I'm going to give it to salesperson A. Oh, no, I don't want to lose this. Salesperson A. Like, that is not sustainable.
Right.
There's no growth in that. And it's not inclusive, by the way, because why is the rest of the people on your team, if they can't, I look at the sales leader, can't sell, right? The third one is to celebrate curiosity. Learn about your team's backgrounds, not just their resumes, and celebrate that. And then one of the things I did yesterday in a team meeting, because you were late. No, you were serving one of our clients. I'm glad you even showed up because you had the outfit.
I had a choice.
I started off the meeting and I said, hey, tell me, what do you do when you're feeling stressed, you're overwhelmed, you leave work, whatever? Like, what do you do to just completely check out? Like, what do you do to refill your cup? Like, just, right? And I went around the room and I had my executive partner take notes because I want to know, like, what do they do when they're sensing that, right? Like for you, it'd be woodworking, or it would be on the grill, or, maybe playing a little golf, maybe not, that's more stressful, but it's like thinking about it's not just their resume, like the complete them, because part of resilience is understanding when I see people are at a tipping point, I need to encourage them to go do a puzzle at night. I need to encourage them to go shut everything off, watch the Braves game was one of them, like things like that. We just need to understand.
That could be stressful too.
It could be stressful, especially right now, unless they're playing the Mets. And then finally, you need to lead by being vulnerable. How do you got to model that, right? You got to share your growth areas, share what you're learning, share where your mistakes were, and then share the feedback. And so as I was looking at some thoughts around this and around this kind of leading inclusive and creating a culture, Gallup did a survey where it said 31% of employees say that their leaders focus on this. That means up to 69% of them are not, which goes back to what I was just saying a minute ago. This is almost identical to the engagement scores of where we're at with our teams. And so how do we intentionally design this? What does it look like? Well, I think it starts with some of these practical ways that we just talked about here. And you have to be intentional about really driving and designing the feel of this, being an inclusive leader with your unwritten rules, and that culture will model itself. If you just let it happen, going back to a simple example earlier, people are going to feel like at 11:30 at night, while I'm on a plane somewhere and they should be in bed, they feel like they need to respond to my email. Yeah. Right? No, they don't. Like or I'm in a meeting and this side of the room is being quiet. Well, they're just going to be quiet. No, they're not just going to, I want to hear their feedback. So hopefully there's just some thoughts. Maybe there's some things that we talked about today. You go, man, that happens with me. That happens in my team, my organization, that this will be a game changer for you.
Well, bottom line, everyone wants to belong. Yeah. Everybody wants to be valued. Everybody wants to be safe in their environment. And everybody wants to be themselves. And when they are, and they feel that way, then they bring their entire self to work. So I don't think you would ever intentionally exclude anyone, but sometimes our language and our unwritten rules can get in the way of that. So great conversation. If you want to know more about this, get the learner guide for this episode, or learn about our other offerings or other podcast offerings. You can do all that at maxwellleadership.com/executive podcast. You can also leave us a comment or a question. We love hearing from you and very grateful you'd spend today with us. That's all today from the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast.